I don't think that at the moment anything Britain had done in the past would have changed things very much. I think it's very much today a question of how much elbow room the communists in Beijing will give the government in Hong Kong. What they should do is allow the government in Hong Kong to establish a commission of inquiry which would look at the reasons for the demonstrations, would look at the reasons for the violence of the demonstrations on both sides. And I don't condone violence, whoever perpetrates it. But you've got to understand, I think, that one of the reasons why the demonstrations are continuing and why they've got out of hand in some cases in terms of violence is first of all because of the very tough policing, and secondly because nobody will actually talk to the demonstrators. You can't make tear gas an alternative to politics.
And you've described Brexit as a shambles and the current Prime Minister as a mendacious chancer. How do you feel Brexit, how do you see Brexit going? Can it be rolled back at all? And what role do you think this election will have to play in that? How would you like to see it go as well?
Well, I hope that it will produce a House of Commons which will manage either to find a way out of the path we're on at the moment, or else we'll find a way in which we can get the best possible future deal with Europe, even if we're outside the European Union. That's what I hope for. But the Conservative Party have been busy throwing out of the party the sort of members of Parliament, or squeezing out of the party the sort of members of Parliament who might produce that sort of outcome.
You've talked about the rise of populism, which has sometimes been attributed by some to the economic woes of people under a deregulated capitalism of the sort that arguably was fostered by Margaret Thatcher. What cause do you see behind the rise of populism and the far right, and how can it be stopped?
Well, it's a very complicated question, but it's partly because I don't think globalization was handled very well in every country, and I think it's because of the eroding of a belief in the importance of international cooperation to deal with national problems. And I think some people have been encouraged to think that there are simple knee-jerk solutions to rather complex political problems or economic problems, and that's simply not the case. There's hardly an issue or big issue which a country faces nowadays which it can deal with on its own without working with others.
It's something that we've seen in Gibraltar happen across the border with the rise of Vox, for example. With Brexit, should Brexit develop in such a way that perhaps we stay in the European or try to rejoin the European Union following Brexit, is there any way that Gibraltar's rights can be safeguarded? How can Gibraltar be prevented from becoming a bargaining chip?
Well, I think it's very important that Gibraltar's interests are protected by the United Kingdom, which has huge responsibilities to Gibraltar. And one of the things that worries me about the future negotiations with the European Union, if we're trying to negotiate a trade deal, is that, as with other trade deals, every member state of the European Union has a right to intervene or to say what it thinks. And in some cases, where there's more than one parliament, where there are regional parliaments, every regional parliament has. And it's very important that we shouldn't allow politics in member states to actually affect the way of life and the livelihood and the prospects of people in Gibraltar.
How have you experienced Gibraltar in the festival so far?
I think it's terrific. The range of things here, a range of talks and so on is very impressive. There have been one or two I'm sorry I haven't been able to go to myself. There's a wonderful, for example, young Dutch writer called Bart van Els, who's actually a professor at Oxford University, at my own university, who's written a book which is wonderful, which I'd like to have heard him talking about. So there are all sorts of books like that which I'd like to have heard discussed. Book festivals are one of the really exploding cultural phenomenons all around the world, and I think the fact that Gibraltar has got such a good one is an indication of what a marvellous international community Gibraltar is.